and welcome back again to another art lesson with me, Miss Robertson. Today we are learning to create a graphic novel, a comic book, a comic strip. We can have a little chat about how these differ, but what they have in common are bold writing, colourful pictures, and pictures in a sequence that tell a story. Now, comic books and graphic novels used to be looked down upon because they weren't sophisticated like books. These started as quite simple, funny stories, but nowadays you can actually find a graphic novel version of a lot of books, and even classics like those written by Shakespeare. I want to talk to you a little bit about the kind of story we find in a comic book or a graphic novel. It tends to be a hero's story, or a story about a hero's journey. These stories have in common that the main character is an ordinary person. Something happens to them. Either they take on a great responsibility, or an event happens which makes them extraordinary. Next, the character is doubted, or challenged, or faces some great difficulty they have to overcome. And in most hero stories, our main character, the hero, is triumphant. They're successful against the odds. Now, some examples of these type of stories would be Harry Potter, Spider-Man, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Lion King. I'm sure you can find lots of examples. The story I want to look at just now is Mulan. Now, Mulan is a classic Disney film that I loved growing up. It's still one of my favourites now. In my story, I need to think about where, when and who. In a hero story, we have a main character, we have a guide, sometimes a couple, and we have an enemy. In Mulan, the main character is Mulan. Her guide comes in the form of Mushu, the dragon. Her enemy is Shan Yu. It's set in Imperial China, and that's in the 15th century, so the 1400s. When I talk about the story of Mulan overall, the first thing that we do is meet Mulan, and we find out she's an ordinary person, she's a little bit awkward, she's a very unlikely hero in the story. She's also a girl, and at this time she wouldn't be going off and going to war, which is exactly what she does. She disguises herself as if she has a brother and steps up to join the war in place of her father, who's now quite old, and we get the impression that he was injured during the last war. Now, the point where she reaches a challenge, she's not really cut out for going to war to begin with. She's discovered that she's a girl, she's doubted as the hero of our story, but then she's triumphant. We see her working really hard, really applying her skills and her strengths. She saves China. I'm going to focus on the scene where we first meet Mulan. So we find Mulan making some notes on her arm before she meets the matchmaker. Now, as a girl in China at this time, that's Mulan's destiny, and she's already running late. Now, she's using some really creative thinking. I've got a few jobs to do, I don't have time. Gets the dog involved, and the dog can feed the chickens, which is quite clever. Here we see Mulan's father praying to their ancestors to look after everyone, but particularly to look out for Mulan today, because the day she meets the matchmaker is going to be really, really important for her future. So, in my first panel here, I'm setting the scene. So I've said China, 15th century. And I've drawn Mulan in her bed, like we saw, writing notes on her arm. And I'm setting the scene by writing, Mulan is preparing to meet the matchmaker. And this is what she's saying. Now, when you write a speech bubble, it's always important to write down the words first and the speech bubble around the writing, rather than trying to cram all the writing into a small space. The next panel down, we can see the cockerel, which alerts Mulan to the fact that she's late. She's running around trying to find the dog, little brother with wet ink all over her arm. And we read a comic book just like we would read a normal book, left to right, going down the page. Although comics have some origins in 18th century Japan, comic books were first made popular in the UK and the United States during the 1930s. Now you can find lots of templates online very easily if you type in blank comic book, blank comic strip, or blank graphic novel. You could also draw one out if you prefer. Make sure you do that with a ruler. Now a comic book, unlike the pictures in the story, it almost shows us what the camera would see if this was a movie. So we're looking at the wide shot here of Mulan's father, praying to the ancestors, with little brother running round about him. And then the second panel on this same line, we've got a close-up of his face. So it's just his face that we can see closer. We can't see the background. And we get to see a little bit more expression on his face. Oh, especially Mulan. So he's asking the ancestors, please. The last panel, she slides off her horse beside the matchmakers. Her mother meets her and she's not very happy because Mulan has rushed there. She's a big mess with twigs in her hair. Okay, so for today, I'd like you to pick a story, either a film or a book, that's a hero's story, a hero's journey. It has to have an ordinary person who becomes extraordinary, faces a challenge, and is triumphant. You're drawing one page of your comic book. Now this could be from the beginning, the middle or the end. Pick a scene that you like, but we're not trying to do the whole story. Now as always, make sure to upload your work to the online classroom and I can't wait to see what you create.